His Divine Grace, D.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavritti ki, Gaur Premanandi. This is festival season, and Radhar has picked a string of nice festivals to begin celebration. Balaram Purnima yesterday, and today. Can we see the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
That would be nice. Thank you very much. In honor of this occasion of Srila Prabhupada departing Calcutta to come to the West, so we're taking a little journey with Srila Prabhupada in his, we're calling it an extraordinary journey, historic, prophetic, improbable voyage of our founder Acharya to come to the West. One man's journey into a million hearts. There's a photograph of the Jaladuta. Looks pretty impressive. Quite unusual for the time and the circumstance for a sadhu to cross the ocean by cargo ship. Cargo ships are known to be very comfortable. But we'll hear something about the arrangements that were made for Srila Prabhupada and by Krishna for him. This is, of course, dedicated to our founder Acharya, who, by coming to the West and after his arrival, after some time establishing ISKCON, which we celebrated a little bit earlier in the month of July, excuse me. And we'll begin discussing about Srila Prabhupada's meeting with Bhaktisiddhanta, where he first received the instruction to go to the West. This was in 1922, when Srila Prabhupada was just 25 years old, an ardent follower of Mahatma Gandhi. And during this time when India was struggling for its independence from England, Srila Prabhupada had a friend who invited him to Vedanta, and Prabhupada was a little reluctant. He had met many sadhus, and he wasn't so impressed by so many sadhus. But he describes his friend literally forced him. And so, sure enough, he went on a rooftop somewhere in Calcutta. And while both Prabhupada and his friend were still bowing down before Bhaktisiddhanta, while they were still down and just rising, immediately before any formalities, Bhaktisiddhanta said, "You are an educated young man. Why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the whole world?" That's a nice introduction, huh? He didn't even know who Bhaktisiddhanta was.
And the lecture went on. In the course of the discussion, Srila Prabhupada raised the following question. Who is going to hear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message? We're still a dependent country. If we go to the Western countries, they'll see us as subordinate to England. First, India must become independent. How can the culture of India be seen respectfully by others outside of India if we're still under subjugation? Well, Bhaktisiddhanta had a 20-minute response to that concern. Bhaktisiddhanta's reply, in essence, was, we don't have to wait for a change in Indian politics. The message of Krishna consciousness is so important, exclusively important, it cannot wait. It's not dependent on who the ruler is. Leaders come and go, circumstances change, and on about the absolute truth is true at all times, in all circumstances, and there's a great urgency in the world today that is forgetful of life's ultimate mission. So he spoke quite strongly. Whether one power or another ruled was a temporary situation. I'm just reading now, this is Lilamrita. But the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness, and the real self is the spirit soul. No man-made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of the Vedic scriptures and the line of spiritual masters. Although everyone is an eternal servant of God, when one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards the nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement for Swaraj, were simply cultivating this illusion. Real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him establish his eternal relationship with the Supreme. And it goes on. True peace can only be found when we act and see things in connection with our ultimate source, Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada heard Bhaktisiddhanta speak. He was already married and had a small child and was still completing his education. So it was difficult for him to take up the request that Bhaktisiddhanta gave him. But in his heart, he accepted, here the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are in very capable hands, and in his heart he accepted Bhaktisiddhanta as his spiritual master. Please note, this was 1922, and Prabhupada was then 25 years of age. Some years later, in 1933, so that's 13 years later, no, 11 years later, Bhaktisiddhanta traditionally would, as we do in ISKCON, would give first initiation, then later second initiation, but very especially recognizing Prabhupada's position, he offered him both initiations at the same time in Prayag, Allahabad. And please note, this is the same place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Rupa Goswami. So very, very significant. Prabhupada's life had already been dedicated to Bhaktisiddhanta, and now it was confirmed. So just 2 years later, after his initiation, Srila Prabhupada was with Bhaktisiddhanta, attending a Braj Mandal Parikrama with his young son. And Bhaktisiddhanta gave him an instruction, a pointed instruction that Prabhupada spoke about later. He spoke in Bengali, of course, but I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. And this was by the side of Radhakund, a very sacred place. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is giving him an instruction. Prabhupada at that time was a quite successful businessman. And more important than anything, whatever you might consider as important, building of temples or whatever, print books. That was just 2 years after his initiation. And the next year, 1 year after that, again, Bhaktisiddhanta instructed him, I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of other members. This will do you much good. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. Now, Prabhupada had already established himself as a capable writer. In fact, when he was initiated, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said to Abai, he is very good at listening. Prabhupada explained that when they were on this Brajmandal Parikrama, in the evening, there was a choice. They could go visit some places nearby where their camp was set, or they could hear him speak, and many persons wanted to go see the places, and Prabhupada would stay and listen. And Bhaktisiddhanta marked that. He likes to listen. And Prabhupada said, when I would listen, often my brain was puzzled. I couldn't understand what he was saying. There wasn't language. It was his way of communicating was very high, but he had faith in his spiritual master. He heard, and so he continued to progress in Krishna consciousness that way. And he had established himself as a writer. So that's this quote here. Fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant. So Prabhupada took this as a direct instruction. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists. So Prabhupada took this as a reconfirmation of what he heard during their first meeting of 1922. He had no doubt. This is what his spiritual master was wanting him, which means that's what Krishna was wanting. And so he began that journey in earnest, both of these instructions. He deeply studied Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's writings. As you see in the painting, there's the two acharyas, Bhaktisiddhanta and, of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The life and works of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta revealed the essence of these teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Very deep and very profound and very impacted in his heart. And how to communicate this in the English language. So now moving forward in time, in 1943, Prabhupada was 57 years old. He had a flourishing business up to that stage, and he closed his business and just 2 years later, he shifted, when he was, 3 years, he shifted to Vrindavan, taking up the Vanaprastha stage of life by the arrangements of one of the Goswamis of Radharaman temple, Vishvambar Goswami. He made an arrangement with one of his friends, who was another Goswami at the Radha Damodar temple, to give a place for Prabhupada to stay and to write. So just short time after that, 3 years after Prabhupada moved to Vrindavan, he accepted sannyas. Here's how Prabhupada expresses it himself. I was sitting alone in Vrindavan writing. My god brother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted, practically my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher. So he forced me through this god brother, you accept. So unwillingly, I accepted. So he then was given the title Bhaktivedanta. His birth name was Abai, initiated name was Abai Charan. And so A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami was his sannyas name, 1959. So please consider that's only 6 years before he left for the West. And after accepting sannyas, he made it his business to begin the Back to Godhead magazine, where he went to the Delhi tea shops and wherever else he could sell his Back to Godhead magazine. When he was in Delhi, the place where he stayed, here's a photograph, was Chippiwada, distributing Back to Godhead magazines, writing. And it's described, he had some realization when he was staying in Chippiwada. There was some temple, some worship of Radha Krishna deities at this place. But there were householders who they weren't devotees. And he, expressed that he got some realization. This isn't a good place to propagate Krishna consciousness and write transcendental literature. He had to raise the money. He didn't have funds. So he had to somehow or another, after methods of selling his Back to Godhead magazine and others who were willing to sponsor, to print the magazine. And then the advice of the printer was, why just magazines, hardcover books, because that will endure. And so he shifted, began translating Canto 1 Srimad Bhagavatam, had to find sponsors. Finally, Volume 3 was ready, and he went to visit Sumati Mararji, who eventually gave him also passage on the ship, but she sponsored the 3rd volume. And he was feeling himself now closer to being prepared to go to the West. This is a nice photograph of the deities at the Radha Damodar temple, where he stayed, maybe 20 yards away from where his room was. Here's the room where he did his writing. And here's the room where he did his cooking. Looking out over the courtyard, looking out that window, you can see the birthplace and the samadhi, not birthplace, the Bhajan Kutir and the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. It looks different today, but that's what it looked like around the time that Srila Prabhupada was there. And he felt great inspiration from Rupa Goswami. There's a very nice description, some of you may have read, in a book written by Mula Prakriti, where she went and made interviews of different devotees that had association with Prabhupada. And one of them was a pujari at the Radha Damodar temple. And the man had been, listen to this, he had been a pujari for 78 years. So I don't know how old he was when he was interviewed, but he had to be at least a teenager when he started pujari work. So add 13 to 78, a very old elderly man. And when she had an appointment to meet him, to interview him, and he lived very close by, not, adjacent to some property that was owned by the Radha Damodar temple compound. When she mentioned Prabhupada's name, the man started to cry. And that's how it started. And then he spoke about, I've never seen anybody, I've been serving Radha Damodar for so many years, I've never seen anybody with sadhana like your Srila Prabhupada. And one of the stories he narrated was because his place of residence was very close to Rupa Goswami's samadhi and the whole temple compound, sometimes at night he would hear a voice crying very loudly. And it happened again and again. And the voice he heard was saying, "Hey, Rupa, hey, Sanatan, hey, Gurudev, please give me your mercy. Without your mercy, I cannot do anything. Give me the mercy. Give me the strength that I may fulfill your orders." The sadhu's name was Hridayananda Babaji. He was born at Radhakund and had been a pujari for all those years. And he was so moved by Prabhupada. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, he heard this voice and he couldn't go back to sleep. So he got up to see who was doing this. And there was Prabhupada leaning over with a broom, sweeping in front of Rupa Goswami's samadhi, calling out as he had done regularly. Serving Rupa Goswami, calling out for their mercy, because he was feeling not qualified. This is the humility and the intensity of Srila Prabhupada in preparation to come to the West. Here's a photograph of Gopal Agarwal and his son Brij. And the story goes like this. One of the places that Srila Prabhupada was visiting to seek some assistance for his preaching work was in Agra, not far from Vrindavan. And residing in Agra was a businessman, a Mathura businessman. And the Mathura businessman, Gopal Agarwal, was confiding in Prabhupada his frustration that his young son, Brij, had gone to America for studying in engineering, and he just wanted to stay in America. Now, at that time, that nobody was doing those things. Nobody was doing those things. Actually, excuse me, his son was Gopal. I have to correct myself. His son's name was Gopal. And Gopal had gone to America, and he had his young son named Brij. So when Prabhupada heard this, the man was expecting being consoled and something, and Prabhupada said, do you think your son Gopal could sponsor me for a visit to America? Because sponsorship meant I guarantee the financial upkeep of the person who I'm sponsoring. So that's a financial commitment. And the history was following World War II, visas weren't being issued. Tourist visas weren't being issued between one country and another. It was very common. And by this time, 1965, they were beginning to allow tourist visas. So the tourist visa requires sponsorship. So Gopal was a little disappointed at Prabhupada's response. But 3-4 months later, Gopal Agarwal had Prabhupada's address, and he got a letter in the mail with a letter of invitation from Gopal, the son, to come to America for 1 month. 1 month letter of invitation. And there's the next step. I don't know exactly how this worked, but there's a P form. Those of you from India, you maybe know what a P form is. Permission, I guess, what it stands for. So before you get the visa, you have an invitation letter, you get a permission, and then you get the visa. It's 3 steps. And it wasn't easy at that time, particularly, to get a P form. But it was approved. Prabhupada had a way of persuading people to do things. So now he's got an invitation and a P form, doesn't have his visa yet. So he went to Bombay to get his visa, and he got his visa for 1 month. It had to be reconfirmed once he reached America. There's another story about that. So Bhaktisiddhanta's instruction, Prabhupada feeling not capable. Later he told this nice story that Rupa Goswami came to him and confirmed, don't worry, I'll be with you. Go forward, carry this mission. So he told that in a confidential way to some disciples. So Sumati Morarji was approached twice to get her further assistance, because she had already sponsored the printing of the 3rd volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. And she declined. She didn't say no, but, you're so old, and it's so cold there, and you'll die, and she didn't agree. No, Prabhupada came back. And she had enormous regard for Prabhupada. And she finally consented that she had a ship named Jaladuta. And next to the captain's cabin, there's a guest cabin that sometimes guests were transported, and it was first class, and it happened to be vacant, and the ship was leaving from Calcutta after some number of days. The date was August 13th, 1965. So by lunar calendar, that's what we're observing today. So Prabhupada's in Bombay. So he had to go get the P form and his visa approval permission stamped into his passport. Not easy to do, but he did. And then he began, from this stage, writing a little diary, which was later published by the BBT. I happen to know the devotee Bali Vardhan was given the diary and told he could have it published by the BBT. So he did. Here's the first entry. 1st August, 1965. He got a train ticket to go from Bombay to Calcutta. Mm-hmm. This is how you see the handwriting on the left side. That's his own handwriting, saying, how much he paid, how many rupees he paid for the book and his luggage and this and that. And this is a photograph of Calcutta 50 years ago. That's where he ended up. And when he reached Calcutta on Tuesday, August 3rd, there was somebody waiting to receive him and took him to a place where he could stay. And he spent 3 nights in Calcutta before going to Mayapur, because he wanted to go to Mayapur and seek the blessings of Bhaktisiddhanta, who had given him this instruction actually thrice. Now, there's his samadhi in Chaitanya Gaudiya Mat, and he offered his profuse prayers to Bhaktisiddhanta. And here's a photograph of the Advaita Bhavan, the temple where in Shantipur, where Advaita Acharya had his residence, and his temple is there. There's a really nice, again, another reference from Mula Prakriti's writing, an interview. She interviewed the Pujari there in Shantipur. And the person, the Pujari, said, for many, many, many times in the past, there was one householder who stood way in the back of the temple mandap area, seeing the deity and chanting on his beads and crying. And he was very quiet, and so he never interrupted him. And then some time later, he didn't see him for quite some time. And then he saw him, the same person dressed as a sannyasi. And so then he approached him and said, who are you and why are you crying? Prabhupada said, that he was appealing for the mercy of Lord Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya, and Advaita Acharya to fulfill an impossible mission. He had been given the instruction by his spiritual master to go to the West and preach Krishna consciousness, and he didn't feel qualified. He felt there was genuine humility. He's appealing to the great the Lord Chaitanya and his associates for their mercy, as he was appealing to Rupa Goswami and Bhaktisiddhanta and everyone for the capacity to fulfill this mission. And this was just like a day before his departure. And then comes the day of departure. There's a King George's stockyard. This was the 10th of August. Here's a photograph of a newspaper article in Calcutta indicating Prabhupada's departure. You see across the top. This newspaper article announces Srila Prabhupada's departure for the West, approved in Bengali, that with the Bengali articles over here, and okay, you can't see because the people in the room can see. That's the Bengali article, and then here's the translation in English. So it was planned for this 38-day journey. Here's the permission slip for Prabhupada to have accommodation and the Jaladuta. And on August 13th, Friday, 1965, Srila Prabhupada boarded the Jaladuta at the age of 69. His son, his youngest son, Vrindavan, came with him. And there's a very nice interview of him from the 50th anniversary. Prabhupada gave detailed instructions to him about family matters and financial matters and how to look after all the family members. Prabhupada had a very affectionate relationship with Vrindavan, as well as Vrindavan towards his father. And he just couldn't believe it, that at this age of 69, he's getting on a cargo boat to go to America. with just a suitcase and an umbrella and a bag of cereal. The books that Prabhupada was going to take, they were loaded onto the cargo ship in Cochin, which is closer to Bombay, where they had been published. Here's Prabhupada's writing. Or excuse me, this is Lilamrita. When the day came for him to leave, he needed that confidence. He was making a momentous break with his precious life, and previous life, excuse me, and he was dangerously old and not in strong health, and he was going to an unknown and probably unwelcoming country. To be poor and unknown in India was one thing. Even in these Kali Yuga days, when India's leaders were rejecting Vedic culture and imitating the West, it was still India. It was still the remains of Vedic civilization. He had been able to see millionaires, governors, the prime minister, simply by showing up at their doors and waiting. A sannyasi was respected. The Srimad Bhagavatam was respected. But in America, it would be different. He would be no one, a foreigner. And there was no tradition of sadhus, no temples, no free ashrams. But when he thought of the books, he was bringing transcendental knowledge in English. He became confident. When he met someone in America, he would give him a flyer. This flyer is shown on the screen. Srimad Bhagavatam, India's message of peace and goodwill. There's a photograph of Sally Agarwal, Gopal's wife, and she's holding one of the flyers Prabhupada gave her. So Friday, the 20th, is he's boarded the Jaladuta. They're making their journey. They're just outside of Cochin. It's Janmashtami Day, and the captain arranged for the whole crew to sit together for 1 hour and have a Krishna Janmashtami festival with distribution of prasadam. And then he sent a message, a radiograph, whatever that is, to Sumati Mararji. And the ship, this is Prabhupada's writing from his diary, the ship is stranded on the Arabian Sea about 4 miles away from the coast. We are in this position from 3:20 p.m. to 9:30 a.m. So when they reached Cochin, this is now the 20th of August, it's a 38-day journey. And shortly thereafter, they pulled in to Cochin, the dockyard, and the Bhagavatams were loaded onto the ship in metal trunks. Prabhupada's writing here. I saw my books from Bombay arrived in 5 cases, and the agents loaded them on the ship at 4 p.m. So then comes a difficult stage of the journey. There's a map picturing here the journey from India on the western side of the Middle Eastern peninsula there, and up the straits and up through the Suez Canal. So we are floating now on the Arabian Sea. My seasickness began again. Headache, vomiting tendency, no hunger, dizziness, and no energy to work. It is continuing. There's sometimes showers of rain, but for a short time. There was a fellow passenger in my cabin. He also is attacked with seasickness. The whole night passed. And here's the image from his journal showing those days passing through the Arabian Sea. In the course of 5 days, 6 days, he had 2 heart attacks. Not very, no doctor to go to, no hospital. 69-year-old sadhu. Prabhupada wrote or explained, and it's written in Lilamrita like this. I'll just read. Prabhupada one evening with a few disciples at his feet reminisced about how he had come to America in 1965 and had suffered 2 heart attacks at sea. They say that anyone who gets a 3rd heart attack, they must expire. I had 2 attacks on the ship. And then in New York, a 3rd one, paralyzed. Left side was paralyzed. I do not know how I was saved. And one girl, that captain's wife, she studied astrology. She said, Swamiji, if you can survive your 70th year, then you'll live for 100 years. Srila Prabhupada and his disciples laughed. So, Prabhupada continued, somehow or other, I have survived my 70th year. I do not know whether. They say I will live for 100 years, but 70th year was severe. 3 heart attacks and paralysis. I was without any family. At that time, none of you were with me. I was alone. I wasn't dependent on anyone. But on the ship, I saw that Krishna was going to save me. I was going for his mission. It's said that Prabhupada had a dream, as you see in this painting, and then there's another painting. There's the Jaladuta in that black boat, and in his dream, he saw Krishna with Krishna's expansions paddling a boat that was pulling the Jaladuta to bring him to the west. So he took that dream as a sign that Krishna was helping him to reach his destination despite the difficulties. Prabhupada spoke like that. So there's the Suez Canal, and there's the Gibraltar Straits that he passed through, going through into the Atlantic Ocean, and then the Atlantic Ocean journey. The Atlantic Ocean journey, Prabhupada's description was, normally it's known to be very, very rough. But the captain said it was the smoothest crossing he had ever experienced. Now he's still having health issues, but he writes in his diary, September 9th, the whole day was clear and almost smooth. I'm taking my food regularly and getting some strength to struggle. There is a slight lurching of the ship, and I'm feeling slight headache also, but I'm struggling, and the nectarine of life is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the source of my all vitality. Again, the next day, I feel today better, but I'm feeling separation from Sri Vrindavan and my lords, Sri Govinda Gopinath Radha Damodar. The only solace is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which I am tasting the nectarine of Lord Chaitanya's Leela. I have left Bharata Bhumi just to execute the order of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in pursuance of Lord Chaitanya's order. I have no qualification, but I have taken up the risk just to carry out the order of His divine grace. I depend fully on their mercy, so far away from Vrindavan. Now, the journey across the Atlantic was swift compared to all the other parts of the journey. That's on the 32nd day of 38. After midnight yesterday, the lurching decreased and I felt relief. In the morning also, I could not take my breakfast properly. Then he cooked. It appeared to be delicious, and I was able to take some food. Today I have disclosed my mind to my companion, Lord Sri Krishna. There's a Bengali poem made by me today in this connection. At about 11, there is a little lurching. The captain tells me, I have never seen such calmness of the Atlantic. I said, it is Lord Krishna's mercy. His wife asked me to come back again with him, so they may have again calm Atlantic Ocean. If Atlantic would have shown its usual face, people would have died, for Lord Krishna has taken charge of the ship. So here's that writing that he wrote on the Jaladuta. It's different than the arrival prayer. So now he arrives at the Boston Harbor. This is another celebration time for the Boston devotees. 5:30 in the morning, September 17th, 1965. He's not in New York yet, but how are we doing with time? It's 8 minutes before 9 o'clock. Here's Prabhupada's handwriting, the Markine Bhagavat Dharma. It's such a nice poem, I'm inclined to read it. We're almost done anyways, so I'll just read it quickly. My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do with me whatever you like. But I guess you have some business here, otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? Most of the population here is covered by the material modes of ignorance and passion. Absorbed in material life, they think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for the transcendental message of Vasudeva. I do not know how they will be able to understand it. But I know your causeless mercy can make everything possible because you are the most expert mystic. How will they understand the mellows of devotional service? Oh Lord, I'm simply praying for your mercy so that I'll be able to convince them about your message. All living entities have come under the control of the illusory energy by your will, and therefore, if you like, by your will, they can also be released from the clutches of illusion. I wish that you may deliver them. Therefore, if you so desire their deliverance, then only will they be able to understand your message. The words of Srimad Bhagavatam are your incarnation, and if a sober person repeatedly receives it with submissive oral reception, then he will be able to understand your message. He will become liberated from the influence of the modes of ignorance and passion, and thus all inauspicious things accumulated in the core of the heart will disappear. How will I make them understand this message of Krishna consciousness? I am very unfortunate, unqualified, and the most fallen. Therefore, I am seeking your benediction so that I may convince them, for I am powerless to do so on my own. Somehow or other, O Lord, you have brought me here to speak about you. Now, my Lord, it is up to you to make me a success or failure as you like. Oh, spiritual master of all the worlds, I can simply repeat your message. So, if you like, you can make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. Only by your causeless mercy will my words become pure. I am sure that when this transcendental message penetrates their hearts, they will certainly feel gladdened and thus become liberated from all unhappy conditions of life. O Lord, I'm just like a puppet in your hands. So if you like, so if you have brought me here to dance, then make me dance, O Lord, make me dance as you like. And the last line, I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge, but I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I have been designated as Bhaktivedanta, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhaktivedanta. So that was 18th September, 1965. 19th September, Prabhupada reaches New York, the conclusion of the 38-day journey across the sea, and arriving in New York, the celebrated statement Prabhupada said at the end of that walkway, reaching the dock, I didn't know whether to turn left or right. Here's something very interesting, and we're just about finished. There's a discussion because Prabhupada was given a 1-month P form, and when he reached Boston Harbor, the immigration assistant from Boston came on the ship, looked at his documents, and Hari Sori asked, how did you get this 1 month to stay for the whole year? And Prabhupada said, I was extending. The immigration officer came in Boston in my boat. He inquired about this. So he asked me, Sir, Swamiji, how long you want to stay? So I thought, I have no shelter, I have no money, but I've got the return ticket. So I did not know how long then Prabhupada laughs. He asked me, how long you want to stay? So I thought, in these circumstances, I can stay at most 2 months because I have no means. Where to stay, how to eat, where shall I go? So I may struggle for 2 months. So I told him, I stay at most 2 months. Immediately, 2 months, sanctioned immediately. I could not think that I shall be able to, he laughs, that 1 month was there sponsoring, so I thought another 1 month, that's all. That this gentleman has sponsored for 1 month, that is guaranteed. Then I can stay another 1 month, that's all. So after that, I was staying here and there without any fixity. So I was extending the visa each time. I was paying $10. Another 3 months, another 3 months, like that. And 1 year was finished, they refused, no extension. And then, the rest is history. He went to Butler, Pennsylvania, went to Port Authority, which must have been an experience, arrived in Butler and stayed there for a short while, and then back by bus to New York. They had some place to stay in a room that had no windows and no running water and no toilet, and just had a door, and it was an office space. Not even a window. No toilet, no kitchen, Anyway, Dr. Mishra gave him a place to stay, and then the beginnings of the Hare Krishna movement, as we see here in New York. So how much austerity at such an age, and such a refined gentleman, sadhu, in a strange land. But he felt the order of the spiritual master must be carried out, and somehow that was achieved. So the topic that I was asked to speak about was the departure of Srila Prabhupada from Calcutta on this day, some number of years ago, by lunar calendar at least. So I've taken a whole hour And it's already 9 o'clock. And Radhar, what would you like to do now? Would we just, because it's 1 hour, let everyone wrap up things, or should we take some questions, or what would you recommend?
Maharaj, thank you so much for taking us on this very beautiful 38-day journey in 1 hour. And it was really very, very amazing. Such a nice PowerPoint presentation you shared. If it is okay with you, Maharaj, I humbly request you if you could take a couple of questions. Would that be okay?
Sure, as you wish.
Okay. So dear devotees, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, please, or you can also type your question. So Athena has written, Hare Krishna, His Holiness Rompat Swami Maharaj, Dandavat Pranams. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. This presentation was so amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Athena. If anyone has any questions for Maharaj, please raise your hand.
Maybe they can just unmute.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question. I think I know, but I'd love to hear from you. Is there a reason why Krishna, I don't want to say made, but had Srila Prabhupada suffer so much material, I guess even physical suffering, for example, on the Jaladuta, the 2 heart attacks, the vomiting, the seasickness? Is there a reason why he, in one sense, is there a reason why he made the trip so unpleasant? And is it just to glorify his devotee later on? For example, now as devotees, we hear his story, but we know Krishna could just make, in one sense, his experience much more seamless. And we know, for example, the Atlantic Ocean, much calmer, but it was almost seemingly, it was unnecessary for Srila Prabhupada to go through so much physical suffering. Is there a reason why? Thank you.
When you become 70 years old, I think you'll understand why. Although he's a pure devotee and on a mission on behalf of another pure devotee, which is on behalf of Lord Chaitanya, the body still gets old and diseased and has its difficulties. That Srila Prabhupada survived is the protection. And it's not like, as you say, Krishna could have made it so there wasn't any seasickness and so there wasn't any. But when you have a body and you're involved in the material energy, you have to tolerate those circumstances that go along with having a body in the material atmosphere. So the risk was traveling at that age, and he was protected. But even when you're protected, there may be seasickness. And so Krishna sanctioned that, not simply for the glorification of his pure devotee and representative. It's just part of the territory of having a material body. He protected him. It could have been much worse, but he protected him.
Thank you so much.
Shrikant Prabhu, you can go ahead, and before Shrikant Prabhu, you go ahead, I just want to show this book to all our viewers. This is the book that Srila Rompat Swami Maharaj was referring to. It is written by Mula Prakriti Devidasi, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She is no more. She left this world, but she left behind this very beautiful book filled with interviews of many contemporaries of Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, it's a wonderful book. Very intimate.
Thank you, Maharaj. And Shrikant Prabhu, you can please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for such a wonderful story, which inspires, I guess, everybody, including me. Many people, including me, have started on this Hare Krishna movement to get into the spiritual path. What I'm interested to know, Prabhu, is it's easy to get on a path, but what is more important to continue in this journey. So I'm interested to hear from you, what were the highlights or turning points in your experiences which led you still continue in this path so that it could all be inspiration for all of us? Hare Krishna.
It's not on topic, but I'll give a really quick answer because it's personal, and so personal is nice. I would say I was asked this question once in a Bhagavatam class, and it was kind of spontaneous. 3 things. Now, by the way, I've been initiated devotee and practicing Krishna consciousness for over 50 years. So that's there's something that sustains one for that period of time doing anything. And so the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Srimad Bhagavatam, that the answers to questions that is flawless and faultless and compelling, and having the association of a perfect person, Srila Prabhupada. And so that's what sustains. Can't get any better than that. So you can only imagine in the course of so many years of so many public outreach programs, meeting so many people from so many other backgrounds, and the more I have become exposed to different people with different ideas, it's convinces me all the more that what somehow by good fortune that I've been given, it's the very best. It's the very best. And now it's just a matter of refining and perfecting and purifying and being prepared for the final journey. The final journey. And it's not frightening. It's wonderful. So there's some thoughts in response to your question.
Thank you, Prabhu. I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Maharaj, there is one question from Sandeep Bharadwaj Prabhu. If it's okay, I would read it out.
Sure.
He typed it. So Sandeep Prabhu is asking you, Maharaj, how does one keep oneself motivated after seeing such physical discomforts, or say no positive response for the efforts being put in, and at the same time there is a comfortable stage to go back to? Would like to take inspiration from Srila Prabhupada that going through challenges and discomforts, he never thought of going back to Vrindavan and just continue his bhajan in Radha Damodar temple. Sandeep Prabhu, you want to unmute yourself and ask, because I didn't understand what the question is. Is it a question or a comment, Sandeep Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, sorry Maharaj, actually there were kids in the background, that's why it's typed. Yeah, Maharaj, I wanted to know that when we see discomforts and say there are no positive responses for the efforts being put in, how do we still keep ourselves motivated and focused on our goal? And the reference I was just taking so nicely, you showed us the presentation and explained Srila Prabhupada's journey, 38-day journey, and then struggles continued even after reaching US, right? There were no fixed place, and everywhere he was going, there were so many challenges coming in. But still, he never thought of moving back, right? He had such a nice place to go back in Vrindavan and stay there and continue his bhajan, but still, he just kept putting in his best and with a positive mindset that, yes, Krishna has brought me in here and he has a business to do. So,
well, Prabhupada did think of going back. It is said he regularly would go to the ship, the dock, and ask, when's the next boat going back? And the man would say, when the next boat, and then he commented, you're always asking this question, but you never go back. It's not that he never thought of it. He knew his options. And it wasn't just he had a nice place. His heart was in Vrindavan.
Yeah.
He had given his heart to Krishna in Vrindavan. So how did he endure, even despite the hardships he did contemplate? Because he had an instruction. And his life was inseparable from the instruction. I mean, we hear those things, but we can see that in the life of our founder, Acharya. Prabhupada told the devotees, Satsrup Maharaj told me this. Prabhupada said, any of you would not have been able to survive what I had to endure. So it wasn't just difficult, it was superhuman.
Yeah.
So the compelling, your question specifically, how to endure when there's hardship, no response, etc. There's a higher purpose. And your higher purpose will sometimes get challenged or tested or examined in different ways. You can take it that it's Krishna's examining. Oh, Sandeep, do you really want to be with Krishna? Sandeep, are you sure? This is Prabhupada speaking now. How about a little difficulty? Are you sure? And you say, difficulty, no problem. I want to be with Krishna. So Krishna says, maybe he wants to be with me. What about a little sense gratification? And Sandeep says, no, thank you. I only want Krishna. And so this is Prabhupada speaking. He didn't use Sandeep, but when Krishna sees that we're really, we just want him, he gives himself to us. And it's not that Prabhupada didn't already have Krishna, but we can look at it this way. Krishna was examining him. Krishna was through the fire of ordeal. This is Bhaktisiddhanta's language. Taking away anything that's residual other than Krishna's shelter. So what you have to cling to something. And you cling to the instructions of the spiritual master and to the lotus feet of the holy name. Now you can cling to the lotus feet of the holy name anywhere, because the holy name will go with you anywhere. But you cling, and you cling. And Srimad Bhagavatam, that's what he said. He had full faith in the message of Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. And through the message hearing regularly, people will gradually come to understand. So he had full faith in the Bhagavatam and Krishna and the order of his spiritual master. That's what carried him. And that's what can carry Sandeep and me and anyone else that's trying to reach Krishna through the bhakti process.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. It's very wonderful. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj, for such a sweet answer. Maharaj,
may you not have many ordeals, Sandeep.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
But when you get them, you know what to do now.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
definitely, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Jai Ho. Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, we have 3 more questions. How much time do you have?
Let's take 2 of them.
2 of them. Okay. So, Athena, you can go ahead.
I apologize. There are many more questions that came up, but most important one that comes to mind is, we know that Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee.
Yes.
And we've read or even heard later that he was able to see Krishna, talk to Krishna. But even before embarking on his great mission, he heard the voice of Srila Rupa Goswami. Even he had dreams of Krishna. So he knew that Krishna was behind this mission. And of course, it was given by a spiritual master. Twofold, I apologize. One is the reason why he didn't go earlier when the first time his spiritual master told him this order in one sense. He waited so many years, almost 50 years. In one sense, you could, as a normal person reading it, could say, oh, maybe he didn't obey his spiritual master because he didn't perform that order when he was first given it. But most importantly, the question is for us normal jivas, when we can't see Krishna, we can't, hear that voice. How do we know when we are performing, a mission that we are endeavoring for Krishna, that it is correct? I don't know if it's just that anything related to Krishna, we, like karma yoga, we give up the fruits, we still endeavor, whether it's successful or not. But it seems like we could all want to say, well, I could always turn to Krishna, he can always hear his voice in every little decision or every endeavor or purpose that we try to strive for. How do we know if that is what Krishna wants and if Krishna is behind it, given that we don't have that direct connection? And I apologize, I don't know if the answer is just spiritual master or Guru Sadhu Sastra, but from a normal daily practical perspective, how can we understand that, or how do we know in one sense? Thank you.
You just threw three things at me at once, and I only have two hands.
I'm sorry.
For the first part was Prabhupada, why didn't he go right away? And Prabhupada expressed, I didn't feel capable, I had my duties. And then finally he said, better late than never. So he was looking within himself, feeling, I should have, could have, but I couldn't because, not feeling qualified, having his duties. So he got to the stage of his life where his worldly household duties were complete. And meanwhile, Lifetime in Preparation, the first volume, a lifetime of preparation, was preparing himself. He knew the instruction and he had to carry it out, but he had to prepare himself and wasn't feeling qualified and had, so much. He got pushed through his god brothers, and or at least through one god brother, and to go forward. So that's some thought on why he didn't right away. Supposing, you or I, now go to the personal side, supposing you or I don't feel qualified to do something that we're asked to do. A fool rushes in, but, someone that's not a fool will feel I'm not qualified. I need to make myself prepared to be qualified to do some, but your heart is dedicated to that something. So that's how we take that lesson from Prabhupada when we're given something. Now, the third part of what you were asking, at least from what I could understand, because the voice transmission wasn't so clear. How do we know where's the line of something that we should do and could do, but we step over the hesitation, reservation, and we just go forward and do? And how do we know it's what Krishna wants us to do? That's kind of like what your question is. One thing is you can ask qualified devotees, please give your wise advice. And if you don't have such persons in your life, find them. There should be such detached, wise persons in your life that can help guide you understand when you reach a juncture, whether to turn left or right or pause. So take guidance from qualified persons. This is our Vaishnava way. And at some point, there are certain things that are clear that Krishna wants, and we may not feel qualified or may not sure whether to do it this way, that way, or the other way, but we have to move forward. We can't just forever stay treading water. So we begin cautiously to move down a certain path with guidance and with your searchlight on. You're wishing for Krishna to give you some indication. Is this the right path to go? Is this the way that it's best for me to move on? And if you get some indication that's otherwise, you retrace your steps and go in a modified direction. until one becomes a pure devotee, super soul signal may not be, we may not have a receiver on fully. So we have to be careful and cautious and Guru Sadhu Shastra guidance and go forward. We have to go forward. And a devotee is not just, blind adventure. We're thoughtful, guided by Guru Sadhu Shastra, and we want to go towards Krishna. We want. And Krishna will help us. And when Krishna sees we want, he will give us the resource to know the answer to your question. As long as you have that inquisitiveness, I want to know. And I want to know for sure. Krishna will help you. Krishna won't leave you flapping your arms. I don't know. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay. So that was 1 out of 2.
Yes. Lavanya Mataji, Lavanya Kari Mataji, you can go ahead, please.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my most humble obeisances. All glories to Guru, your divine grace and Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, I want to know if Srila Prabhupada, when he's getting ready to go for West, then is he that internally getting more and more attracted to Krishna, and that made him more determined to follow his Guru Maharaj's instruction?
We don't have any indication that he wasn't 100% attracted to Krishna at any stage. And then, so your question is more and more attracted. We have no indication like that. It's a mission, it's a preaching mission, it's a particular type of service to Krishna. And there's so many different services to Krishna, but he was being asked to do a specific one, which he felt not so qualified to. It's not that the shortcoming was insufficient attraction to Krishna. The shortcoming was, this is mission impossible. I'm not qualified. It's, using the phrase everybody uses these days, it's beyond my pay grade. I don't have the adhikar. I don't have the capacity to do this mission impossible. And, he had to prepare himself. He felt, there's this wonderful history about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanting devotees, his disciples, to go to England. But it was being delayed because he wanted to have a very substantial publication in English. Sri Krishna Chaitanya was called, and it took a long time to prepare it and then to print it and bind it. That was being carried by his sannyasis that went. So Prabhupada was preparing himself through the Bhagavatam, because I don't want to go empty-handed. I want to give the message of Lord Chaitanya, which is the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it took time to prepare, but it wasn't the shortcoming of, insufficient attraction to Krishna, and then when it became sufficient, he was ready to go. That's not the right picture.
Thank you.
So, Adhika Radhar, let's wrap up, huh?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you so much once again. On behalf of ISKCON of Atlanta, I want to express my gratitude to you.
And may you have another 9 days of celebration ahead of you.
Yes, Maharaj. And dear devotees, just a quick announcement. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Her Grace Malati Devi. She will be speaking to us. She is another very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So please join us tomorrow again. And now let us all unmute and very enthusiastically, with love and gratitude, let us thank His Holiness Rompa Swami Maharaj for keeping us mesmerized with this very sweet class on Srila Prabhupada's journey to deliver all of us. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you everyone for putting this together. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you.